we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. Special shout out to station manager Steve Marston, and who's the dude out there working with him right now? Russ, what's that? Or not Russ, Zach, what's that guy's name? Sean. We had some weird transmitter glitch before the show, and they went out to the transmitter site and rigged something to keep us on air. And then our guest who's coming on, Monte Cook, was kind enough to let me call him up and throw a bunch of confusing babble at him, I'm sure, and he just kind of rolled with it. But I think we have him on the line. So, Monte, are you there with us, buddy?
I am. Hi.
Hey, man, so glad to have you. Thanks again for rolling with the punches. On your end, you're probably like, I'm fine. I'm on Skype, but, we just wanted to make sure everything would go smooth, and we normally get a chance to test beforehand. But I'm gonna cue you in on something, Monte. Doing live radio is a lot like being a DM. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. So you think you got it all ready to go, and then you got to roll with the punches. So, but we're on the air and ready to go. I'm gonna do some housekeeping notes, Monte, and then we're gonna dig right into the show. I've done an extremely brief news segment because I want to make sure to give you plenty of time to talk about Invisible Sun. And if folks don't know, I'll introduce Monte here fully more in a moment, but this is the Monte Cook, who's been involved with several high-profile role-playing game projects, and I think has been in the industry since 1988, if I remember correctly. So I'm very, very glad to have you on. Folks, this is live call-in talk radio. It goes out as a podcast after the fact, but if you're listening on Saturday, either early afternoon in some parts of the country, or for Monte, and I believe are you in Seattle, Monte?
I am, yeah.
So it's late morning for you. If you're listening Saturday, either local on 96.5 FM The Answer or online via the stream at 96.5fmtheanswer.com, we're live. You can call in at 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. And you could ask Monte a question yourself, or if you had a comment, you can also tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. And if you're listening to the delayed version by podcast or on Krypton Radio, there'll also be show notes for this show with links to the news item and stuff about Monte and Invisible Sun and Monte Cook Games up at ShanePlays.com. Like I said, if you're listening to the podcast or the Krypton Radio version, that's ShanePlays.com. Last week's show is out there as a podcast. It would talk to author Gene DeRosa about his encyclopedia and trivia book for the Twilight Zone classic sci-fi thriller anthology series. Are you a Twilight Zone fan, Monte?
Oh, God, yes.
I figured you might be. So, yeah, there's really this guy, my guest is an author and he's got a book coming out very soon that it's trivia and like an encyclopedia entry for every episode of the series. And it was really fascinating. So really enjoy talking with him. That's definitely near and dear to my heart, that show. But the show does go out as a podcast. It goes on the blog at ShanePlays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, and more. We are on SoundCloud now. And last but never least, Shane Plays does go out on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is SciFi for your Wi-Fi, KryptonRadio.com. And Gene Turnbow and everybody over there do a fantastic job with a 24-hour all-geek internet radio. Okay, so there's the housekeeping notes. Again, we have Monte Cook, who is, from what I understand, you've been in the game industry since 1988. And I know you've done a lot of different things, but some of the high points is you were instrumental. You were a core designer on D&D 3rd edition.
That's right.
And you've also gone on to found, or you also did Malhavoc Press. And then you've also gone on to found Monte Cook Games, which does the Cypher System, the Strange and Numenera and that sort of thing. And I know that's an incredibly abbreviated, history of what you've done. So if you'd like to add anything to that, please feel free.
How do you sum up about 30 years in a couple minutes? So yeah, that sounds like a great summary to me.
Okay. Well, if basically there's a good chance that if you're an RPG nerd, which we have a lot of RPG folks that listen to this show, including myself, as the host, do I listen? Yeah, I guess I listen to it too. Zach's looking at me like I'm an idiot. That's my engineer. Then you've probably played something that either Monte Cook directly designed or influenced. And I want to take this moment to tell you, Monte, personally, as a gamer, I love Numenera.
Thanks.
I love Numenera. I'm D&D from way back in the 80s. So D&D is still my first love, and I still play D&D. But any chance I get, if I'm going to go to a special event like a con or some sort of RPG event and they're looking for one-shots, I always run Numenera for people to expose them to the system. I love not only the setting, but I also love the system. I think it's a great system, and I also love the Torment Tides of Numenera computer RPG. Which I think I think that game is so sublime that a lot of people don't realize what they have yet. I really think that people are going to look back and say it can do so many different things in such new ways, and it captures, the ninth world so well that, I'm a big fan of that game. So I think it's a hidden gem, a hidden masterpiece. So, but anyway, have you played the computer version? Have you had a chance to do that?
I did, but it was always, because we had approvals and had to go through demos and things like that. I haven't, since it has come out officially, I haven't sat down and had the same experience that everyone else has. I've kind of saw it grow in pieces. But I love it. Right. And so, I would play it, and they would send me, and I would get, maybe 45 minutes worth of play. And then so I'd play through that and kind of give some feedback and whatnot. And then, then I'd get another hour or whatever. Right. So I was like, you got to binge watch something that I had to watch, an episode at a time.
Yeah, at a time. Well, I think they did a fantastic job of capturing the feel of Numenera in the ninth world. And also, I was excited to see the Numenera or the Cypher System adapted to a computer version. And I think that's really cool too.
I have to admit that I wasn't even expecting that. I originally the agreement was just for the world, and I was gonna be super happy about that. But when they were able to capture the Cypher System so well in a computer game, I was thrilled.
All right. Well, I also want to give a shout out to your RPG game for kids or for youngsters and adults, kids at heart. No Thank You Evil. And I've had the delight of Shauna Germain has come on the show a couple times. One time talking about Numenera, another time talking about No Thank You Evil. So my kid is 3.5, and I'm eagerly awaiting soon when I can sit down with him and play No Thank You Evil. So that was a really neat thing. You guys are putting some different stuff out there. Now, what we're mainly going to be talking about today is your Invisible Sun RPG. And I had Charles M. Ryan about a year ago came on and talked about it, but I'm really excited to have you on one because I'm like, hey, talk with Monte Cook. Yes, definitely. But also I'm curious to see, now that almost a year's gone by since the Kickstarter, were you able to make the game the way you anticipated wanting to make it? I'm curious from a design perspective, if anything had to change, once you got into the, the nuts and bolts of making the game. But before that, Monte, I got to banter with my engineer, Zach, and you're welcome to banter with me. Zach's a movie buff. Zach, I'm going this afternoon. Me and the lovely Sheila, we're going to Valerian in the City of the 1,000 Planets.
Okay.
Now, I've been looking forward. This is one of the movies I've been looking forward to all year long.
Yeah.
And Luc Besson, guy who did Fifth Element, based on a French comic book.
Yeah.
And I hear that the story is only so-so, but I got to see these big visuals on the big screen.
It's a beautiful film that you definitely should. I recommend to anyone to just go watch it for the visuals.
Yeah.
Now for the
well,
plot.
I'm sure it's incredibly amazing. What about you, Monte? Have you seen this movie?
I did, and like you, I was really looking forward to it. Big fan of the Fifth Element. And it's a very pretty film. That's about all I can say.
I think that, and I prepared my wife for that too. I'm like, Sheila, I just want to see this because it's these visuals I've got to see in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
So I've prepared her for that. So
Okay.
hopefully she'll be okay with that. I gave her alternatives, but she said, no, we'll go see that. So
Okay.
I've been looking forward to it all year. So, all right. And then out of SDCC, Zach, all this news came out of SDCC, right? Which was cool. None of it, I mean, it was all cool, but the only thing that really got me like wanting to dance around my office was this trailer for Ready Player One.
A Monday warrior, mean strike. Today's Tom Sawyer, mean pride.
I really want to see this movie, and I guarantee you that this Tom Sawyer, the song that they play in that trailer, is going to have a resurgence in popularity and get back out there in pop culture again. Have you seen this trailer yet, Monty?
I have, yeah, and I read the book too.
Yeah, I've got the book on my nightstand. You know how you have the pile of books that you're trying to work through on your nightstand?
I sure do.
Yeah, it's about 4 down for me. I think it's either right on top of or right under The Dying Earth by Jack Vance, which I've gotten about 3/4 of the way through The Dying Earth. So was the book amazing? I keep hearing nothing but good things about it.
You know, I thought that the book, I felt like that the book was just written just for me.
Right.
It played off of everything that I, hold near and dear to my heart. So, D&D and Joust and everything, just amazing.
Well, they had in the great big car race you had, of course, the DeLorean. It's Freddy Krueger's, right? I mean, it sounds like they basically shoved everything that was possibly 80s pop culture down to critical mass, and then it exploded. It's kind of, it's just like this love letter to the 80s, the best I can tell. So I'm really looking forward to reading the book. And, I'm a big Spielberg fan, so I feel comfortable that, it'll be done well, and hopefully it'll capture the essence of that book. So, okay, one quick news item, and then let's go ahead and turn on the microphone in the newsroom there, Zach. All right. They're working hard on a Saturday. Folks, remember, for every $1 of Patreon support the show gets, the news team gets a penny an hour raise. I mean, as a boss, Monty, that's a win-win, right?
That sounds great.
All right, this is kind of a sad one. We're going to just do one news item this week. I always try to highlight legends in the various geek industries. Marvel legend Fabulous Flo Steinberg has passed away. Now, this article I'm reading from is from Bleeding Cool, but the news is all over the place out there. Basically, if you don't know who Fabulous Flo Steinberg was, folks, she was part of the original Marvel Comics bullpen in the 60s. And in fact, at one time, the only 2 full-time Marvel employees were Stan Lee and Flo. And Flo was like his assistant, his secretary. She would help proofread. She would fill in and do anything to get the books out the door. And she was also the person who handled, because Marvel, when it came out, had a whole different approach to fandom, to responding to fans. They had the, Merry Marvel Marching Society and all that. And, she would write funny letters back to the fans and all of this. Now, eventually, I think about 5 years after she'd been there, she left. Evidently, there was a pay dispute. I don't know. But she left. She did come back in the 60s and worked with Marvel again as a proofreader and other things.
Correction. Flo came back in the 90s, not the 60s. Storm and Shane.
And she published, she was one of the first underground comics, Big Apple Comics. And underground comics are spelled with an X, so COMIX. Usually if you see that, that's kind of an underground, independent comic book from like the 70s or 60s. But she published one called Big Apple Comics. And it had some big names in it like Neil Adams, Archie Goodwin, Denny O'Neil, Allen Williamson, and Wally Wood. So she was out there doing it, just on her own. I know there's a lot of focus on wanting to make sure that, all industries have representation among, genders and ethnicities. And she was out there in the 60s and 70s when it was extremely rare to have a woman higher up in the comics, and she was out there making it happen. So she also, there's a really cool, you should go look for it, What if number 11? They said, what if the original Marvel bullpen had become the Fantastic Four? And she's basically the Invisible Woman. And it's, I think, Stan Lee is Mr. Fantastic. Jack Kirby is the Thing. And it's just a really cool, go look up the what if number 11 for a nice little shout out to Flo Steinberg. So I'm going to do something here, and then we're going to talk with Monty. They say radio silence is a no-no in radio, but I do moments of silence to help honor people. So we're going to do a moment of silence for fabulous Flo Steinberg, who helped make Marvel Comics what it was. And that moment of silence was for Flo Steinberg, who was one of the original Marvel bullpen members. And how fun would that have been, Monty, to be part of the Marvel bullpen back in the 60s and 70s?
Oh, it'd have been amazing,
yeah.
Right? With all those people and
yeah,
and creating at just such a crazy pace like they were doing.
Yeah,
it sounds intense but fun.
Yeah, it's Marvel Comics today, it's they're doing their own thing, but I don't think people realize if you weren't there at the time that the change on the industry that Marvel Comics had. So okay, anyway, we're here to talk about Monte Cook Games and Invisible Sun. Now, Invisible Sun is, I would characterize it as a high concept premium RPG that is deeply immersive and also has elements that'll let you continue to role play outside of the official sessions. Now, that's how I'd characterize it. This game defies an elevator pitch, but if I had to make an elevator pitch, that's kind of where I'd go with it. But what I would like to do, Monty, let's assume that you've just met somebody who that likes to role play, but they don't know Invisible Sun. They never heard of it. And you're going to tell them, and assume they don't know who you are. So they're not listening because, this is Monte Cook, but you want them to listen based on the merits of the system. How would you, if you were trying to get somebody to consider trying out Invisible Sun, how would you describe it?
Well, I would probably start by describing it as, it's a premium product, like you said. It's a big box full of stuff. If you are at all a board game fan, and you love getting those board games full of all kinds of stuff that help you play and manage all the stuff in the game, that's what this game is like. But it's a role playing game. I wanted to kind of capture that feel. But the game itself is it's a surreal setting, and what I mean by that is that there's a lot of strange things going on, but it's perfectly sort of melded with normal reality. Nobody looks at the strange as being anything particularly strange. It's all just sort of normal. That's kind of what surrealism is. And the game sort of offers a really deeply immersive experience that, where it's designed so that you play it at the table. You've got all these cards and counters and things like that I described. But then in between sessions, the game master and the players can get together and do we call it development mode, but they're like side scenes. So you can go off and do something that pertains to only just your character, which enables us to do things like, most of the time in a role-playing game, you have to focus on the group. If you focus too much on one character, all the other people are just sitting there on the table bored.
Right.
But this actually enables us to, develop, strong character arcs. It's playing Invisible Sun is more like reading a book or watching a movie than any other RPG that I've ever played, because you develop your character and you create these story arcs that apply specifically to your character, right? So this isn't necessarily a game where you go off and do some quest that the game master has come up with, but instead this is a game where you say, well, what I want to do is I want to find my father who disappeared 10 years ago, and the game becomes about that then. And so it's really the players are sort of more in the driver's seat, and the stories that you create are very focused on the characters.
Okay. Yeah. In fact, the way Charles Ryan described it to me when I talked with him. He said there's no character concept that's off the table. You just have to learn how to do that, right? It's just, you just have to, like, if you want your character to do a certain thing or be a certain type, like you just have to discover how to do that. And he said that your very first session is character creation.
It is, because character creation is something that you do as a group. And so what you're doing, because all the little details of your character are so important. For example, when you get to the point where you're deciding, who your character is, where you live, what your house is, what your neighborhood is like, the other players all contribute to all of that.
Right.
And so, the other players might decide, well, you've got this creepy neighbor who, you see weird lights on in their house, in the middle of the night, and there's weird noises. And so, they're actually helping create the seeds of the stories that are going to be told later.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you heard of a game called Hill Folk?
I have not played Hill Folk, but I'm aware of it. Yeah, well, it's a Robin Laws game.
Yeah, I saw a video talking about it, and it takes like that concept even further. Now, we're not here talking about Hill Folk. We're talking about Invisible Sun RPG, but that game, you like everybody kind of you all come together and contribute ideas and brainstorm who everybody's characters are going to be in it. It sounded, really interesting. So, and that's one of the things I'm wanting to highlight, that Invisible Sun is a role-playing game, but there's a deeply immersive role-playing and narrative element to it. It's, they're like D&D, literally, some people can play it literally as my character is just a bunch of numbers and I'm going to kick down doors and kill monsters. And that's fine if that's how they want to play it. But D&D can also be like narrative and role-playing, but Invisible Sun is very immersive narrative role-playing. So for people who are looking for that rich narrative experience.
I would say that, that's who this game is definitely for, right? If you just want to go and kill a couple of orcs and kick down a door and whatnot, I have no problem with that. That's a fun way to play a game. But that isn't who Invisible Sun is targeted at. Right.
It's like I said, it's almost a surreal, supernatural literary experience, because you're living one dimension over, right? Because the sun. Well, actually, let's get into this after the break, because I got to take a break and pay the bills. But I want to mention really quick, one of the reasons you're on the show today, Monty, is because you're about to open up for pre-orders. Is that right?
Yeah, they just opened.
They just opened. Okay, so I definitely want to talk about that during the show. Folks, stay tuned after the break and learn how you can pre-order this really exceptional. I don't even know how to play. Go look at it. Go look up Invisible Sun. See everything that's involved with it. You've never seen a role-playing game like this. I guarantee it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and keep talking with Monte Cook of Monte Cook Games about Invisible Sun.
The smell of mildew emanates from wet stone walls. The only choices before you are to enter the door to the north or travel back up the stairs from whence you came.
Okay. I go to the door to the north.
In this room you encounter an event promoter.
Arkansas RPG Con is the Arkansas convention for all tabletop role-playing games. Arkansas RPG Con will be held on Saturday, October 21st at the Gene Moss Building, located at 913 East Sevier Street in Benton, Arkansas. Early bird tickets are just $7, so visit arpgcon.com for all the details about Arkansas RPG Con.
Okay. Well, I guess I go to Arkansas RPG Con.
Yeah, that does sound pretty fun.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. Remember, if you're listening live on Saturday, 1 o'clock in the Little Rock area, Central Time, you can call in at 501-823-0965, or you could tweet me at Shane Plays, and I'll be happy to get your questions and comments into the show. We're talking today with veteran and influential RPG game designer Monte Cook of Monte Cook Games, also of D&D fame and Malhavoc Press and all this stuff. Monty, welcome back to the show.
I'm happy to still be here.
Cool. I'm happy that you're still here too. So, did you hear the ad at the beginning of that break talking about the Arkansas RPG Con?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. I will very likely be running Numenera at that. So,
cool.
Yeah. I always look for opportunity. And I'll tell you, you guys put out this, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it has 10 ready-made adventures in it.
Right. It's called Instant Adventures.
I wish every RPG system did that. I love that so much. So it's such a great idea.
That was, again, I play a lot of different kinds of games, and one of the things that kept us from one of the things that I kept thinking of was, you can sit down on a Friday night and say, hey guys, let's play Dominion, right? Let's play Pandemic. But it's really hard to just say, let's play D&D, right? Unless someone's got an adventure already all written and prepared and everyone's got characters and everything. So Instant Adventures is so that you can do that, right? They are designed to be things you don't have to have read the adventures ahead of time. You can just go. Right.
No, it's fantastic. I really, really impressed. Like I said, I wish every system would do that. Because it's just, and I tend to run, for people who've never played Numenera before, there's the one where there's the village where the little tentacled creatures are randomly attacking people. And you think it's just let's just go find the bad guy and kill everything. But then it turns out that they're really trying to eradicate a threat, right? But if you don't investigate deep enough, right, you could actually cause more problems. And most of that's one of the things I like about Numenera or these instant adventures. You've usually it's very rarely let's go to A and do B and then we're done. It may look like that on the surface. But in other games with Numenera, you could do what it seems obvious is the bad guy, and then you could actually cause problems. So, but anyway, we're talking about Invisible Sun, the innovative new RPG that's coming out. When is it? When's the actual? I'm gonna try to sound cool here. What's the actual street date on that, Monty?
Well, the street date will be probably early March.
Okay.
Kickstarter backers will hopefully get it a little bit before that, and then it'll be in stores in March.
Okay, so but pre-orders, I want to make sure to give you an opportunity to talk about this. Pre-orders, not Kickstarter. We're talking about pre-orders have opened now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so go ahead.
You can go to MonteCookGames.com right now, and you'll see something to click on there. And it'll not only give you the chance to pre-order it, but you can read and read and read and read. We have loaded the site with all kinds of information because, like you said earlier, it is actually a game that's a little bit difficult to just sort of sum up in a sentence or two.
Right. Oh, very much so. I mean, it's basically, as I understand it, the reality that we live in here on Earth is actually the shadow of the real reality. And
that is exactly right.
The player characters, if I remember right, go one sun over, and a sun is actually kind of like a dimension, and they're operating out of the reality.
Yeah, that's a fine way to put it. Basically, each layer of reality is sort of defined by the color of the sun, and we're you and I and everyone listening, we're in the gray sun, which is the illusion, the shadow, and
we're a bunch of muggles.
We are. But the real world out there is, surreal and full of magic and, just really interesting, amazing things. It's a very visual game. I love the art that we've got. We've got a great art director, Bear Whiter, and he's gathered together all these artists that are just kind of pouring their heart into this art that is really not like traditional RPG art. It's sort of more, one artist kind of referred to it as more like fine art. I would say it's more like surreal art, but it's beautiful and gorgeous, and you can see a lot of that if you go to either MonteCookGames.com or InvisibleSunRPG.com.
Well, the way I would describe the art is very cool. Not urban fantasy as in urban being gritty, but urban fantasy as, it's an urban setting. It's a civilized setting, but it's just bursting with surreal and magical elements.
Right.
Yeah, and the characters all look very cool, and it's not quite Victorian, but there's a little bit of there's just as Monty said, go check out the artwork. So there's this. I'm looking at one right now where there's this guy. He's walking down an alley, but his shadow is quite different than he is. That's going over on the wall. So it's just neat stuff. And that's just one example. So what comes if they pre-order the full? And I apologize for this. The full Monty. What do they get?
Oh, man, I don't even know where to begin. So you get this, we call it the Black Cube. And again, if you go to the pre-order page, there's a fun little animated graphic that just shows all the stuff that's in the box. And it just pours out of the box because one of the aspects of this game is that there's a deck of cards that is called the Sooth deck. They're these round deck cards, and it's meant to be a little bit like the tarot in that it's a divinatory thing, but they actually have game mechanical reasons why you're playing these cards in the middle of the game. Throughout the course of the game, they're kind of dictating the changes and ebbs and flows of magic. And so you get these cards, but you also get the Path of Suns board that you're playing the cards on. There's 4 hardcover books in there.
Those are hardcover. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Thanks to the Kickstarter, they weren't originally, but that was a stretch goal. There's 1,000 cards in this box.
That's crazy.
Each card has a spell or a magic item or something special like that your character might have. Dice, character sheets, all kinds of handouts and weird stuff, and resin figurines. It's one of those things where the Kickstarter really took off, and with each new stretch goal, some new cool thing got added to the box, and now we all get to benefit from that.
So, what kind of response have you had to the? I mean, are you getting a sense this is going to be like it? Well, are you getting more of a? Were you like afraid? Hey, this is so different that people may not be into this. Or you? What has been the response? Once you went with the Kickstarter, and then you keep. Was it bigger than you expected? Was it about what you expected?
It's bigger than I expected. And I try to be really honest with people and say, this is an immersive, deep role-playing experience. If you're the kind of person who, in between sessions, you're thinking about your character and you're thinking about, well, if you play D&D, right? Next level, I'm going to take these feats or whatever. If you're that kind of person, then this is the game for you. But that's not everybody. This isn't a game for everybody. And but if you're really character focused and you just love kind of noodling with things and thinking about it, and if you're the guy who's always calling your GM on the phone in the middle of the week saying,
I got one of those players.
Hey, then this might be the game for you. And so I thought that there was going to be a pretty limited audience, but it turns out there's more of us than I thought.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people who just really like that kind of thing.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I like that you've done, and I hope to see more of this designed into future games or new editions of existing games. One of the things I really like about what you've done, I talked with Charles about this, and I also saw this in my research and everything. You've specifically designed the game knowing that modern life has interruptions, and you don't always have 5 hours a week and all this, or somebody can't make this game. You've designed in-game reasons to accommodate that stuff.
That is absolutely right. So, if you've played a role-playing game, you know that, sometimes somebody's going to cancel at the last minute. Somebody's going to have to leave early. The game is designed up front to handle all that. You don't have to come up with something really quick or just kind of ignore it or whatever.
Don't they fade out? Don't they fade out from that sun? Wasn't that the in-game mechanic?
They get drawn back into shadow. They get pulled back into the illusionary real world. If you think of it like the Matrix, right? You kind of get pulled back into the Matrix. And so and there's other things too, right? Like you said, not everybody can get together. We'd all love to have 6 hours once a week to play a game, but that doesn't always happen. That isn't the way our lives really work. Mm-hmm. And so the idea here is, and that's actually where the deluxeness of the product comes from. The deluxe nature is when we can get together on those, which sometimes is less often than we would like it to be, let's really celebrate it. Let's have a bunch of cool, beautiful things sitting on the table and whatnot. But then when we can't all get together, let's still keep the game going. And that's what that development mode is that I was talking about, where, you can just, maybe through a phone call, maybe you can meet at a coffee shop, whatever. The game master and one or maybe two players get together and they still keep the game going, right? That something happens, they go, talk to somebody or some interesting thing or whatever. And so the game
so it's like a TV show. I mean, it's just, there's stuff happening off camera sometimes, or there's scenes with just a couple of characters. It almost sounds like it progresses like an episodic TV show to me. That was just a thought I had. So I don't know. Well, and there's also, now there's an app, and I'm assuming the app is optional, but there's an app that all the players can use to help keep the game going outside of official sessions. And am I correct in understanding that there's also a limited play style or a play format where players can get together without the GM and do stuff?
There is. It's kind of a narrow option, but if one of the people who can't show up that week is the game master,
right?
The players can still get together and say, we're going to do this thing. It doesn't have, and then they give that information to the game master, but it doesn't have to be in real time, right? They can send them a text or an email or whatever. Right. He sends them back information, probably, if possible, through the app, because the app will allow you to draw a card and whatnot that will indicate what's going on in the game, and then you can resolve those actions that way. And so yeah, you don't even need the game master to be there at the time.
Yeah, see, that's so cool. I mean, it's very designed. I'll tell you what that reminds me of. There's Dave, the digital DM, who I've had on the show a couple times. He does a lot of D&D stuff on Twitch. But when he was a kid, like in elementary school, they were just D&D crazy. They would play it at lunch and recess. And when they were in the classroom, they just pass notes to each other all day long. Like, this is what I want to do. And then the DM would write something and pass it back to them. So they just kept going all the time. It was just nonstop D&D. Well, I'll tell you, I've got to get another break in. But when I come back, here's what I want to ask you, Monty. Every designer, or creative person, whether they're making movies, they're writing books, doing comic books, making songs, whatever kind of artist they are, they always have that project where they were like, if I had no restrictions on me whatsoever, this is what I would do. So don't answer it now. I want to know. I want you to think about it. When we come back, I want to know, is this your ultimate? Is this the game you always wanted to make? Or do you still have something up your sleeve that we may get down the road? So I'd like to kind of talk about that. And if there's anything else you want to make sure to talk about when we come back from the break. But I'm going to throw some love at a sponsor. This is, folks, we're talking with Monte Cook, veteran game designer, head of Monte Cook Games. We're talking about Invisible Sun RPG. When we come back after this break, feel free to call 501-823-0965 or tweet me at ShanePlays if you'd like to ask Monty a question. But some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. And by the way, Monty, the owner, Josh Wilhelmi, who owns Game Goblins, did your Kickstarter. So my best chance for checking out this game will probably be bugging him. But yeah, so,
I like him already.
Yeah, you like him already. Yeah, call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. For all your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Check them out over at 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and they're staffed by friendly employees. Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. And by the way, Monty, yeah, they carry the Strange, they carry Cypher System, they carry Numenera, they carry No Thank You Evil, they carry all your stuff.
We owe so much to great game stores like that.
Yeah.
I can't express enough how much I love that.
Yeah, I always tell people, support your friendly local game store, because they're not just a business, they're also a node for the community, right? It's not just about what they sell. I mean, there's a lot of community that happens because of game stores. But anyway, call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into things we love. Our phone number is 501-823-0965. My Twitter is Shane Plays, ShanePlays. Feel free to reach out if you're listening live via either method. We've got Monty Cook here for about another 9 minutes. So, Monty, we're back, and I just wanted to, we've been talking about Invisible Sun, which is your innovative, just crazy cool, new, deeply immersive, surrealistic fantasy role-playing game that also has, a lot of other elements that are in with it as well. And it's obvious that you've put tremendous amount of thought and creativity and design into this game. I mean, you basically created your own tarot for it, right? Among other things. So I want to ask, is this, because every artist, every creative person out there has their ultimate project that they've been thinking about forever, maybe even since they were a kid, that if I had no restrictions and I could do it exactly how I wanted, this is what I would do. Is Invisible Sun that for you?
Well, yes, it is. But here's the real truth of that. I have been just extraordinarily fortunate as a creator. I started playing D&D when I was 10 years old and was a huge D&D fan, and then I got to go on to work on D&D and help write a new edition of D&D, and later I got to do a super deluxe my campaign setting as a giant book called Tolus. Numenera was something that had been mulling over in my head for decades, and now Invisible Sun is the culmination of a lot of things that I've been thinking about since I was a teenager. And we would play D&D, but we would also play D&D while we walked home from school and just talk about it, right? And capturing that sort of between the sessions kind of gaming that we did. And so it is kind of that one of those ultimate products, one of those ultimate projects, but a lot of the things that I have done have been that. I've been very, very lucky, and I don't have any plans to hang up my hat here after Invisible Sun is over, so there's probably more still to come.
All right. Well, I just kind of suspected looking at this. I was like, this feels like one of those projects that it's like if I could do that one thing, I just kind of suspected this was that for you. Yeah, it's very in depth, very cool. So how long? I don't know. Obviously you've been thinking about it, since, like you said, since you were a teenager. But how long did it take you to actually design it? Like, said I say, I'm going to make this game. Like, how long? Because I feel like it would. I feel like it would take longer to design and play test and work out different things than the. And this is an unfair thing to say, but I don't know how else to put it. The average RPG.
Well, so yeah, there's development time on games is really, really varied, right? If you are doing a supplement, an adventure, something like that, that's one thing, but designing a whole new game, that's another thing. And then designing a whole new game that has its own kind of paradigm shift, and plus just the deluxe nature of all the components and everything. It's really kind of an undertaking. So Invisible Sun, by the time I sort of put my proverbial pencil down and say, okay, I'm done, this is ready to go, I'm going to say it's probably about 2.5 years.
Yep. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And that doesn't even count sort of the, like you were saying, the just sort of pie in the sky dreaming, maybe someday I'll do a game, that kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah. And it's also, we were talking earlier, like with the, the players getting together and determining things. There's a lot of, I know it's a buzzword. I'm not trying to sound like an executive, but there's a lot of possibilities for, all role-playing games have possibilities for emergent storytelling, but there's some serious possibilities for emergent gameplay and storytelling here and character types. So yeah, it's really exciting. So what do you hope? What's your ultimate hope this releases to the public? What's your ultimate hope for the impact that this game has on not on the industry money wise, but just in the hobby? Like, what's your hope that it'll do for the hobby?
Well, so maybe two things I would say, right? One is just the idea that RPGs can be something really deluxe, right? If these are things that some of us just absolutely love, right? And we just obsess over them and love RPGs so much. So why not have a big extra deluxe thing with all the pieces and everything? Just like, you open up one of those fantastic Fantasy Flight board games, right? And you're pulling out all these cool pieces and cards and stuff. Mm-hmm. And
that's half the fun of the game.
Yeah. And so why can't an RPG do that too? That's part of it. Right. And then the other thing is just, this is in many ways, Invisible Sun is my way of sort of solving so many of the problems that plague RPGs, right? I've been doing this for a long time, and the number one thing that I hear is, I can't find a group that can meet regularly. I don't have enough time. We got this one guy and he never shows up. All these kinds of things.
Right.
The
human nature effect
set out to address those things, right? And still make it possible to play a game even despite all of that.
Right. Well, this could even potentially, I live near a military base, and a lot of times people, they get stationed somewhere else or they deploy. This could potentially allow them to still participate on some kind of level. It's just really cool stuff going on here. So having said that, hey, it's hard to, and we got about 3 minutes left here. Do you foresee in the future, like working with like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or something to try to facilitate this online? Because this is obviously going to present, situations that may be harder to, or more of a challenge to play it on like Roll20 than some of the other. I mean, have you already been thinking about that? Or are you even interested in that? Or do you want this to be more of a at the table experience with, the out of the other box stuff you've already mentioned?
My goal is that this game fuses those two things together. Like I said, when we can actually all sit in the same room at a table, I mean, that's the best way to play a role-playing game. And so let's really make that something special.
Right. I agree. That's, if you can do it, that's the best way.
But if you can't, right, then this game facilitates the sort of other kind of play as well.
Okay, but there's no, like I said, I know in some cases, like some publishers work like directly, and it may not be something you want to talk about. I'm not trying to push you into something you don't want to talk about. I'm just,
we work
with
Roll20 with Numenera and The Strange. So we're very cognizant. There's a lot of people out there playing over the internet, and we like to try to work with those people a lot.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, this game, as much as I hate to say it, there's so many cool components that, the full experience, you really need to see these components, and I think touch them and lift them up and all that. There's even a big hand. There's like a hand. What does the hand do?
It holds a card, one of the cards that you're playing as you play along, and the card that gets played in the hand stays in effect throughout the whole game. So it's the most important card that gets played.
Well, Monty, I got to hand it to you. You've designed a really cool game. I'm sorry. Bad jokes are one of my favorite things in the world. We got about a minute left. Is there anything else that you would like to mention?
Just that I'm very aware of how lucky I am that I get to put my ideas out there like this, and how fortunate and grateful I am that people respond to them well and seem to enjoy some of the things that I enjoy and have enabled me to keep doing this. So I just want to say thanks.
Well, and fantastic. I'm glad you're doing it. I definitely feel that we're in a golden age / renaissance of board games and RPGs. I hope it continues indefinitely. So I got to do this to you. Speaking of bad jokes, Monty, we have the bad joke of the week. I have to do this to you. I apologize in advance. Okay. What did the buffalo say to his son when he left for college?
I don't know.
Bison, love you. Monty, you've been a pleasure to talk with. Folks, don't forget you can pre-order Invisible Sun. Monty, we'll talk to you later, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Stan, do you have a few minutes?
For a fabulous Gal Friday? Sure. Say hello to the fans, Flo Steinberg.
Hello, fans. It's very nice to meet you. As Marvel's corresponding secretary, I feel as though I know most of you from your letters. By the way, Saul Brodsky wants to say a few words.
Saul Brodsky? Who's he?
Stan, the fans know you have a bad memory by all the mistakes you make, but this is ridiculous. He's been your associate for years.
Really? We ought to start paying him one of these days.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that. And how come I don't get my name plastered all over the mags like you do?
Because I can't spell it, that's why.
Well, as long as you've got a good reason.
Hey, what's all that commotion out there, Saul?
Why, it's Shy Steve Ditko. He heard you're making a record and he's got mic fright. Whoops, there he goes.
Out the window again? You know, I'm beginning to think he is Spider-Man.
You mean he isn't?
Who said that?
Just that lovable old letter of me.
It's adorable Addie Simic. What brought you here?
The subway.
Oh, well, ask a bonehead question, Flo.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.